Hello, everyone, and welcome to Virtual AI's October webinar. And thanks for spending time with us today. And we promise you this will be a very insightful conversation. You will get lots of great ideas on deploying AI in financial services. And just a quick intro of myself and our panelists today. My name is Chris, and I lead the partnerships at Virtual AI. At Virtue, we are helping organizations navigate the security and compliance challenges in AI deployment. To get started, I would like to invite our panelists to give a brief introduction of themselves and share the perspectives that they are going to share in today's conversation. So Andrew, let's start from you, and then we'll hear from Sanmi.
Great, thank you, Chris, and it's great to see everybody on the webinar. My name is Andrew Chin. I work for AllianceBernstein, an asset management firm. We manage approximately 850 billion or so. I've been at the firm for almost 30 years, so it's definitely true. I joined the firm when I was born. Okay, so that's me. I've done lots of different things in my organization. I ran quantitative research. I was the chief risk officer for over a decade. I ran one of our business units, and now I'm the chief AI officer. So I'm really happy to share about some of my experiences as a chief AI officer and how I've been partnering with Virtue AI on our safety initiatives.
And Sanmi?
Thanks, Chris. I'm Sanmi Koyejo. I'm a co-founder and head of AI at Virtue AI. We already heard a bit about Virtue AI, but we work on enterprise-facing safety, security, compliance issues, bringing enterprise software to close these kinds of gaps. I guess I haven't been at Virtue since I was born. I think that's such a fun analogy there. But I've been, before Virtue, been an academic for a long time. So over 15 years of experience, most recently is faculty at Stanford University, thinking about all the aspects of AI safety and security, robustness. And I've worked also in industry. I've spent some time at Google DeepMind as a research scientist, working on deploying state-of-the-art safety and security and compliance technology. On the academic side, I've worked with a variety of organizations. I also have a presidential career award for scientists and engineers. And so a lot of time in academia building a lot of the foundations on the technology, and excited now to be bringing this technology to bear for enterprise-facing use cases.
Yep, thank you both. So today we are going beyond our partnership announcement, and we'll have a real conversation about what it takes to adopt secure AI in financial services. And for our audience, we will have a dedicated time at the end for Q&A. So please feel free to drop your questions in the chat as we go. So I guess the first topic, let's start with the AI transformation journey. So Andrew, let's start with your journey. You have been in AllianceBernstein for 28 years, and now as a chief AI officer, what drove AB to make AI a strategic priority, in your opinion?
Yeah, look, we've always tried to be innovative, especially on the technology side. So I actually started our data science efforts about 8 years ago now. So that was before all the craze around Gen AI, right? And the reason that we started these efforts about 8 years ago was because we wanted to build our data science capabilities, because we thought that was critical for organization, to deliver results that our clients expect from us, right? So we started some time ago, and so we've been building lots of capabilities over the last 8 years or so. But as you know, things changed dramatically with the introduction of ChatGPT, about 3 years ago now, right? So a couple of years ago, our senior leadership saw the impact that we were having on the AI side, on the data science side. We were making our employees more effective. We were making our organization more efficient. And given those early gains, we thought, you know what? We want to double down and be fully invested in these technologies and capabilities going forward. So that's when our organization decided to have, have this role, one of the first in our industry, so that we can actually make sure that we focus on the right areas to transform our organization using AI, right, across the firm, not just in one particular area.
Yeah, that's awesome. And within your organization, what are the top 2 or 3 use cases you think that are most promising for AI adoption?
Yeah, I would say that that with ChatGPT, a lot of the use cases center around efficiencies, right? Can I be more efficient than doing something? I think we know examples of those, right? And I think that's great. I actually, my North Star, our organization's North Star is still around delivering top-notch performance for our clients, right? So I always want to think about how can these tools hopefully help us become better investors going forward and deliver the outcomes our clients expect. So we have a variety of use cases there. How do we make better predictions? How do we do better research? How do we arrive at decisions faster? So that's where most of the use cases are. And then, of course, we have the other use cases that most people are more familiar with, right? The chatbots, content creation. Those are more common, but I would like to think that trying to predict the markets and trying to do a better job on the investment side is critical for us.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And now I'm curious to bring in the perspectives from both the industry and from academia. So Sanmi, from your research at Stanford and your experience working with enterprises, you have seen this transformation across many industries. And what do you think make finance sector a unique sector when it comes to AI adoption, both considering the opportunities and the challenges?
Yeah, Chris. So I think finance is really fascinating. I mean, all of enterprise is fascinating, moving research from, again, technical foundations to real adoption. But finance, I think, is fascinating because, like many industries, there are different incentives, different forces that sort of you have to balance somehow to get technology that's actually meaningful and useful to deployment. In finance, I think some of what we've learned. There's, of course, like many enterprises, pressure to move fast. If your competitor is deploying an AI assistant, you're also incentivized to think about ways that you can build AI technology into your infrastructure. And you want to do this quickly so that you're not at a disadvantage. But I think interestingly, and maybe uniquely compared to some of the other parts of sort of technological infrastructure, finance also has a strong regulatory environment that can be quite stringent. So things like FINRA, SEC, GDPR, where for finance, they're not only guidelines, but real constraints on what enterprises can do and what sort of the rules of the road can be. And I think third, finance stakes, they're tangible and they can be uniquely quite high. And so, issues that may not be as pressing, so issues like a chatbot that hallucinates, or something like a movie recommendation that's annoying. This is something that people can maybe consider not as pressing, something that people can consider ignoring. But in a finance setting, a chatbot that hallucinates financial advice, that could violate fiduciary duties and costs maybe millions of dollars to a client. And so it's much more important to make sure these kinds of issues don't happen. So some of the enterprise mantra around here of sort of move fast and break things don't work nearly as seamlessly in finance because you have to both move fast, but also build trust simultaneously with industry, with your partners. And I think this is a fundamentally different engineering challenge than we have seen with other kinds of enterprises and businesses.
Yeah. Yeah, agree. That sounds a very high stake to deploy AI in the financial services. And Andrew, building on that, you talk about the promise of AI in financial services and some of the use cases already showing impact. So where do you see the biggest gap between the potential of the AI and the reality of putting it into practice inside a large bank? And maybe more specifically, once you identify a use case, what resources, whether it's people or technology or a process you see are critical to moving from proof of concept into production?
Yeah, I think many of the issues that Sanmi brought up, they really resonate with me. The only one, Sanmi, that didn't resonate with me is that finance is the best sector. So, that's the one. But aside from that, I think, Sanmi's thoughts on the competition in our industry is real. I mean, we all we're all trying to outperform in the same markets, so there's a lot of competition across the markets, right? So trying to get access to the best tools, the most capable tools is really, really important. But the most important comment that Sanmi brought up was really around our fiduciary responsibilities, right? So what that means for me is that we have to make sure we use these tools in a responsible way. And that is one of the most important pillars in terms of how we apply AI within our organization, right? So while these tools can do a whole lot, to your point, Chris, I mean, there are some concerns that that we have, whether it's hallucinations or non-determinism. These are issues that we have to grapple with, right? But what I would point out though is really on the data side. I think we have to be very careful about the data that we use. And the data that we put into any tool, not just AI, right? So we have a fiduciary responsibility to protect this data, and to use this data in a responsible way, right? So that is really important. And then the same thing on the tools side, right? We want to be able to use tools that are transparent, unbiased, hopefully. And so there are many considerations there that we have to make sure that we're complying with and that we're comfortable with before we roll these tools out widely.
Yeah, that's super insightful. So I would like to stay on this topic for a little longer, about AI security reality. So Andrew, AllianceBernstein has really been a pioneer in adopting AI, and coming from your background before as a chief risk officer, and what do you think about AI specific risk compared to traditional financial risk that you have managed before? Are they similar in nature, or are we entering a new territory?
Yeah. I mean, as I noted earlier, I was the chief risk officer for over a decade, and some people may think it's kind of strange that a former risk officer may want to lead a technology in AI effort, but I think it's made us really be prudent about how we deploy AI, right? So we're very careful, as I said, in terms of how we think about the tools and how we apply the tools. From a risk framework, I would say that the risks that we see with AI are similar to many of the other risks that we've seen historically in our industry, right? So we have a technology. So then therefore we have stuff like cybersecurity risk. We have data protection issues, right? So these risks are not new to us, not new to our industry, right? So what I normally try to do is I normally try to think about these risks in the context of existing frameworks. And I think that works a lot because then the rest of the organization understands how to think about these risks. Where do we place them? How do we tier them? How do we assess them, right? But having said that, I think both of you know that AI does bring additional risks, right? So these are a lot more powerful, right? The tools are very powerful. And the way they use data, the way they train on data, that's different, right? It's not like putting data into Excel, right? That's one type of risk. But here, these tools may train on your data, right? So there's a variety of different types of risks that we have to consider because of AI. So then therefore we created a AI governance committee across the organization that helps us think through, all these different issues that AI brings. But importantly, we do try to see if our existing risk framework captures many of the new risks that AI brings up.
Yeah, and Sanmi, from a research perspective, and what do you see as the most important approach to close the gap between traditional risk management and the AI native risk management?
Yeah. So as Andrew said, I think a lot of the taxonomy, the broad framework around what we need to worry about, I think a lot of it follows quite well from decades of research on risk management. So maybe even specific to the finance sector, things like market risk, credit risk, operational risk. There are existing frameworks for many of these. But I think as Andrew said, AI brings new dimensions to these risks. And new kinds of threat models that don't exist or were in existence for some of the classic risk profiles. In terms of what research has told us about understanding and mitigating these kinds of risks. So the approach that we've been taking is building layers. So the first is understanding what the risk surface is. And we do this through adversarial testing. What this means is that we build tools to actively try to break the system. And you want to do this before the attacker does it. So you understand where the vulnerabilities of your system are. So classically in security parlance, this is called red teaming. So this idea of adversarially, again, attacking your computing system. And AI systems have, as we may talk about a bit more, very specific kinds of vulnerabilities that red teaming can uncover. And some of what we're learning is that, particularly for AI systems, these kinds of processes are not optional. These are processes that are required to, again, better understand what the risk surface, the vulnerabilities of deployed AI systems look like. Second, once you understand where your risks are, you need some way to mitigate those risks. Again, from our point of view, we build mitigation systems. So we typically call this guardrails. You can think about these as firewalls. And these are built to systems that can catch issues as they come along at deployment. So you want to catch novel kinds of attacks, novel kinds of errors that systems can make, and you want to do this in real time while you're deploying your systems. These kinds of guardrails are important because you can't predict every way that the model can fail in advance. And so you want parts of the system that are built into your actual sort of deployment and service infrastructure. And then third is that you want to understand what's happening as you improve, deploy, evolve your system. So this is continuous monitoring and adaptation. So, AI systems will change over time, adversaries will evolve and attack approaches, and your approaches for understanding the risk surface and the way that you build defenses have to evolve and adapt with them. And I think this is really unique for AI systems, much more so than classic computing systems and much of the existing risk taxonomy. What is often hard about this is that you have to do all these things without slowing down your deployment or technology system. So without adding, say, seconds of latency or generating lots of false positives. And so this is, I think, the key engineering challenge. And this is what Virtue's technology systems have been built to directly try to mitigate. So low latency, ease of deployment within enterprise infrastructure, and then this ability to have very low false positives, which may come up later in discussion.
Yeah. And I'm curious one thing, Andrew, when your team first uncovered the different types of AI specific attacks, like as Sanmi just mentioned, like prompt injection, hallucination in the use case of financial advisory or compliance violation, what was your initial reaction?
Look, I mean, many of those risks are new, right? We didn't see those types of risks before. So we had to understand what the potential impact would be, if we were exposed to those types of risks, right? So as I was saying before, we're trying to see if they fit under our existing risk framework, operational risks, and things like that, and most of them did fit. The nice thing about some of these risks is that because many of our senior directors use tools like ChatGPT at home, many of them appreciate what some of these risks are, right? So it's not vague, esoteric, types of things. They understand what these issues are. So it was easier, for the whole company to understand, some of the issues that we could face, with some of these risks. So I think that certainly helped, right? And then as with any risk that our organization sees, we usually talk about inherent risk and residual risk, right? And inherent risk is just the risk that that a tool, that a process has without controls in place, right? So if I didn't do anything and I just deploy the tools as they are, what are those risks, right? To to our organization, to data, et cetera, et cetera. But if you have controls in place, whether it's stuff we build ourselves, whether it comes with the tool, whether we add something like Virtue AI, those are controls we can put in place to mitigate the risk. And then at the end of that process, we have residual risk, right? So then so that's what we try to assess. Is that amount of residual risk appropriate with the risk profile that we want to take, right? So. But even then, I mean, that is not easy to get your hands around because these are still new risks, right? So I suspect we're going to learn more, as we go along. And in fact, I mean, that's one of the big reasons why virtual AI is actually so powerful as a partner for me, because the company has done such a great job in terms of understanding regulations around the world, right? Really, really difficult for me to monitor myself, right? But that's a level of expertise that you have, right? That I'm able to leverage, right? So that really helps me a lot as I think about what these risks are, how to mitigate them, and then what the impact of these risks may bring, if they were left unmitigated.
Got it. That's super helpful. And we actually got this question from an audience, and I think it's interesting to ask you. So in working on your AI initiatives, how did you translate those technical risk, those terms, into business language for your peer business leaders? And what's the learning curve like for AllianceBernstein team?
Yeah. That's interesting. Look, as I was trying to say before, because many of our senior leaders and board members are familiar with many of these tools already, meaning they use something like ChatGPT at home as an example, right? They already understand, many of these terms and some of the risks, because they may load data up themselves, so they understand the issues with that, right? So actually, it wasn't as difficult as you might imagine. Sometimes the new technologies and new tools is sometimes hard for these folks to understand, but I didn't think that was the case. And as you know, there's just so much press about AI across all media, right? For better or for worse, right? Everybody knows a lot more, right? So that's been very helpful. Now, having said that, one of the things I'm like a big fan of is using the tools where they are appropriate. And so what I do around that is I let the questions and the problems that we have really drive the tools that we use, right? So we don't just say AI everywhere. I just use it everywhere, depending on what the problem is. Does it need AI? So, for example, many of the forecasting problems that we have in finance, traditional AI is actually pretty good, and so we apply that. But there may be other cases where basic automation is good enough, right? If you're trying to automate something in Excel, if you have a nice Excel macro, you know what? That's perfect, right? But so because I tie our tool use to actual problems, it makes it easier for senior management to understand why these tools are important, and then they can evaluate the trade-offs between what the impact is and what the risk is, right? Because otherwise, if they just see the risk, they're like, well, why do I want to do it, right? So having this be question-driven allows us to make the appropriate trade-offs between hopefully the expected payoff versus the risk.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And for Sanmi, when you work with clients like Andrew, how do you help bridge the gap between the research and practical implementation?
Yeah, super, super important question, Chris. I think one of those that I've had to learn, I think this is often a challenge for academics who make this transition to work with industry. It's can be quite different from the academic side and engaging with enterprise. So I think some of the differences include traditionally academia, you're thinking about, particularly if you're working around security kinds of questions, you might be publishing papers showing that attacks work in a certain kind of lab setting. But enterprises are asking a related but distinct question. They want to know, will this break my production system? Sorry. How often might this happen? What is the business impact of any of these issues that might show up? Which again are distinct from, hey, will this attack work? The kinds of research questions that we might be asking in a lab setting. And so there are a few ways that we've worked to bridge this gap. So first is working to translate the technical risks into business language. So instead of saying, hey, the model is vulnerable to adversarial prompt injection, we try to understand what the business use cases are. And so you might say an attacker can manipulate your trading agent to execute a certain kind of unauthorized transaction and prove out what the risk surface looks like in that direction. And so this both better engages with the business use cases, but also better allows us to design and understand what the attack surface looks like and what protection should look like for these kinds of deployments. Second, along these lines, we're also providing concrete demonstrations of the actual use cases. And then bridging across these, we're designing solutions with operational constraints baked in. So, like I mentioned before, we're thinking around real world deployments, so we're thinking around latency requirements, we're thinking around false detections, we're thinking around integration complexity. And partners like AB, I think, have been really invaluable for us learning how to do this well. So, a partnership with AB has been invaluable because Andrew's team is helping us understand which risks actually keep folks like Andrew up at night and which ones are more academic concerns. And so separating these out, mapping from the research to real world impact, I think some of the most important steps in bridging this gap.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And I want to dive into this collaboration a little bit more. So, Andrew, in your solution journey, you already share how you make a decision between like seeking an external partner rather than building the AI security capability entirely in-house. I wonder, how do you measure the ROI of this AI security investment? And in that process, how do you select the vendor? What criteria you focus the most in this selection process?
Yeah. Sammy, I was going to add that, you didn't say that working with industry was a lot more fun. I expected you to say something like that, but you didn't. I like to think we're also
Incredible
fun.
I've enjoyed so much, particularly with you, Andrew. So.
Okay. Anyway, so look, as I think about like deployment within our organization, there were like a variety of things that I thought about. So when we thought about these risks, all the ones that we talked about, I was trying to see how to solve them. Like, how do I address these risks? How do I mitigate these risks, right? So, and one of the things a couple of things that are really difficult for me is one, keeping track of all the global protection, the global data protection regulations out there, right? That's a big deal. We do it, but it's hard, right? And I know it's hard. And then then secondly, the tools that we had already out of the box from some of the vendors that we work with, they didn't have the capabilities to monitor for these types of risks, right? So at that point, I can say, well, I can build something myself to do both of those things. But it's not easy. It takes time to do that. But more importantly, it would take me time to actually keep innovating, to keep abreast of all the changes that are happening in AI and in data protection regulations, right? So that's what really appealed to me. Having an organization, having a partner that has deep expertise on both of those fronts, right? Deep expertise in security, deep expertise in regulations around the world, right? Those are like things that really benefits our organization, right? So those were clear wins for me, right? Now, when you think of it from an ROI perspective, does it save me money and things like that? It's harder to argue for things like that, but I think when it comes to risk management, it's about minimizing that risk surface that you're exposed to, and making sure that you're comfortable with the residual risk profile that you have, right? And that's what I felt like we were able to achieve here, right? That we were able to stay abreast of global data privacy regulations, one, and then two, as the bad actors become a lot smarter and do a lot more things with these tools, I have a partner who's able to play that cat and mouse game, right? And then hopefully, help me assess those risks, right? So those were the things that we think Virtual AI really brought to our organization.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And Sammy, based on your decades of research experience, how does it really take to build a strong AI security capability, and why it's so challenging for organization to get this thing right on their own?
Yeah. So first and most importantly, I want to say that working with industry and Andrew, I'll preface this in every question, has been an incredible amount of fun. And so a couple of reasons why in-house can be challenging. I think one of the big challenges, all the excitement of developing and deploying AI has also meant that AI security, like much of AI enterprise, is still at a research frontier. And so it's this interesting version of a technology that's having real world impact and deployed at scale, but where we're still figuring out how to think about some of these questions as we build and deploy it. These kinds of attacks that we're defending against, things like prompt injection, jailbreaks, adversarial examples. Many of these were discovered in the last few years. My group, other groups my group at Stanford, but also some of the other co-founders at Virtue AI, Bo, for instance, our CEO, were doing academic work that actually helped define what these risk surfaces were like. My group at Stanford has been working on these kinds of questions for over a decade, but we're still publishing new findings. We're still finding new kinds of vulnerabilities. We published a paper just got accepted to NeurIPS last week that was uncovering new kinds of vulnerabilities. So there's still a research frontier that's, I think, novel, and expecting enterprises to replicate this kind of research capacity in-house while still running their core business, I think, is unrealistic. And so having third-party partnerships like Virtue with the expertise to actually be at the frontier of where the risk surface is, I think can be quite an effective approach.
Yep.
Second, effective AI security, I think, requires operating at the intersection of lots of different disciplines. So, we have machine learning and AI technology, we have security, compliance, domain expertise. You need people that understand all the way from, how does a transformer work at the technical level, and how do you engage with something like FINRA regulations and constrained financial advice. Again, you could maybe find this in a variety of different places. It's hard to find it at the same place in that existing industry. And so this is, again, I think a unique sort of operational advantage that Virtue AI and as a third-party partner provides, where we have, again, this sort of broad expertise around both the core technical components, but also understanding what it means and how to apply this to real enterprise and business use cases. And so we've learned a bunch from working with companies like AB around how to do this successfully, how to build good partnerships. AB brings and Andrew brings deep domain knowledge and helps us inform operational constraints. We bring deep knowledge on the research and technical side, specialized engineering. I think it's really hard for either side to do this effectively alone, and really the magic happens at the intersection.
And let me stay with you. Other than the domain expertise, what else did you learn from working with AB that impact how Virtual Guard was designed and deployed?
Yeah, so I think some of the perspectives that have been most important. So understanding the technical requirements. I talked a bit about this, operational constraints. Questions like low latency and where that's important. Questions like matching the technical risk surface to business case risk surfaces, mapping back. So understanding new kinds of business risks and mapping these back to sort of core technical vulnerabilities. I think these are the kinds of questions that are hard to do in a vacuum. And so working with AB, I think, has been invaluable for helping map out the space, coming up with good, meaningful technologies for both, again, recognizing and discovering these risks. So this is the sort of red teaming, understanding components of this. And then coming up with mitigations, coming up with tooling that can help us protect enterprise AI solutions from these kinds of vulnerabilities.
Got it. Yeah.
Maybe, Chris, I wanted to add something here. I mean, it's interesting, Sanmi, when you talk about like a tool, where you're trying to calibrate for finance, one of our concerns was really around, well, how do we trust a tool that is meant to work across, all industries, all sectors? Does it work well enough within finance, right? And so we were actually, very pleasantly surprised, how closely you, Bo, and wanted to work with us to understand the specific risks that we have, and really aligned, our risks with the risk categories and the risk types that you have. So we found that to be very refreshing, because then we understood that we can customize those risk categories and mitigations, to the things that we care about. So I actually really appreciated that a whole lot, and I know that's something we can continue to improve on, as we move forward. So that's what made it also powerful for us, because I can customize it to the way that I want to run it.
Yep. And we got a couple questions specifically regarding the performance requirement and the latency, as you mentioned, both Sammy and Andrew. Why it sounds very specific as why it's so critical in the financial service industry.
Yeah, performance is king for us, or queen and king for us, right? It's if we're fastest to get to a trade, faster to get to an insight, that matters, right? Clients also expect us to respond to them timely, right? So timeliness is critical to us, right? So from that perspective, we wanted to make sure that we had a tool that didn't impact latency that significantly, right? We wanted to make sure that we're able to assess the quality of our prompts, the quality of the responses, understand the risks, and take all of that and then react to whatever question that we had originally, right? So that was important. I mean, back in the day, when I was much younger, it was easier to just like type in something into the computer and just kind of wait, right? Or even when you're dialing like AOL.com, you remember those days, right? So you just have a dial-up, you just kind of wait because that's what we did, right? But my children, when they text or when they do something on the computer, they expect immediate response, right? So imagine waiting a second, a two, three. I mean, it's an eternity, right? So I want to make sure that these tools are being used in a good way across the firm, and latency is one of the key criteria for them to really apply them well.
Yeah, and maybe the question for Sammy, how do you handle the false positive concern in a fast-paced trading environment?
Yeah, just a little bit on the latency thing, and then I'll talk about false positives. I just want to resonate with Andrew's point.
Yep.
I grew up with dial-up internet, and just a very different experience in terms of what the speed of technology can be, and it resonates strongly. My kids also have no patience. To be slow. A little bit on the latency side. So virtually, I think a lot of traditional security approaches are either, or at least current ways of thinking around these kinds of questions. Many of them will invest in, say, classic approaches, things like rule lists and other sort of detectors for failures and security issues. I think some of what we found is that these are just not adaptive enough and contextual enough for what shows up for AI use cases. There's also a variety of approaches that use LLM-based classifiers. I think that's the other very common mode for some of the technology that's being deployed here, either in-house or by third parties. And while this can be effective and sufficiently contextual, I think this is really where we're seeing the latency hit in the industry. So, then your LLM guardrail, if it's large, is taking as long as the AI method is actually solving the problem that you want to solve, adding hundreds of milliseconds or even longer, which very quickly becomes unacceptable. And so to that end, the technology that VirtueAI has built is really optimized for low latency, using a variety of techniques, including building our own models from scratch, which allow us to really build bespoke models that are much more efficient and can be much faster. So, we have sub 40 millisecond latency, depending again on specifics of the hardware, while still maintaining high precision and recall. And so often from a user perspective, the security components look invisible. Responses are no slower than what you'd find in the deployment without this sort of additional security scaffold. And we found that this can be very important, as Andrew said, I think quite important for many of AB deployments. On issues like false positives, again, we've invested specifically on making sure that we have sort of high detection rates for failures, but also have tuned the models to make sure that they avoid flagging, incorrectly flagging issues. So I think lots of experience, it shows up in many places, but I often get examples from healthcare where If you have a detection system or a alarm system that turns on all the time, what people just learn to do is completely ignore this detection system because they just imagine that it's not useful. And so for any kind of guardrail system to be effective, it has to both be highly accurate, but also both on the detection capability side, but also has to be accurate in terms of avoiding false positives, so incorrectly flagging. On our end, this looks like technology development to tune our systems to make sure that we have sort of the right trade-off between detection capability and avoiding false positives. This looks like specific technologies and techniques on the way that we construct and develop and deploy data, techniques like distillation. I can go into a bunch of additional detail, but investment very specifically in making sure that we have, again, sort of low false positive rates.
And other than the performance, I know there's one topic that have been discussed a lot by leaders, that is deployment methods. So between on-prem and cloud deployment, I'm curious, Andrew, why was that non-negotiable for AB?
Yeah, we are in the industry where we are fiduciaries, right? So we want to make sure that the client data, proprietary data is protected. So we prefer an on-premises installation. We trust, what you do on the cloud, right? But I would prefer to have our own four walls around these systems and technologies that we use, because then we can control everything that happens, right? Or as much as we can, I should say, around what happens, right? So that was really important for us, right? Client data, employee data, really, really important for us. We really just have our clients' trust, right? If our clients don't trust us tomorrow, it's a big deal, right? So their data is a part of that. So that's why it's so important for us, right? So we can protect the data, protect the way that our employees use the data within our four walls, right? So that's how we typically approach these problems.
And for Sanmi, how does that change your technical approach compared to cloud deployment?
Yeah, so on-premise deployment is definitely much more technically challenging, but it's for sure the right choice for many enterprises and particularly financial institutions. What this changes is that from a technical point of view, you can't rely on your own infrastructure or centralized model updates. Everything needs to run efficiently on AB side, on the client side, on existing hardware. And so knowing this and knowing how important this is, we designed VirtueGuard to be deployment agnostic from the beginning. And so we built a system that can run efficiently on premise, on a private cloud, and hybrid environments to make sure that there's consistent technical performance across different kinds of infrastructure setups, and making sure, again, that clients can run with good sort of confidence about data sovereignty on their own infrastructure. What's been great about working with AB on this is that it's helped us even further validate our architecture, where we can show that we can deliver, again, very low latency on their on-premise environment. We know that the system is, again, fundamentally efficient, not just benefiting from massive cloud resources and development pathway.
Oh, that's helpful. And now that Andrew, you have the AI system that been running. What would you tell other chief AI officer who are considering a similar investment in AI?
Yeah, look, Sanmi talked about some of the difficulties in an on-prem installation, right? The deployment, but we were surprised actually at how quickly it came and went, right? We thought it'd be really difficult, but I have to say that it was a lot shorter and a lot less painful, Sanmi, than we thought. So that was really helpful, right? So I would say, look, I mean, some of these, especially for firms who've designed their products well, it may not be as difficult as you think, right? So the time it took us to production was actually faster than I thought, right? So doing the POC and then to production, it was a lot easier than I thought. So it's getting ramped up, with the techniques and the technologies, was a pleasant surprise for me, let's say, right? So that was good. And then on top of that, we talked a lot about latency, right? And we've been impressed by the latency. That has not been an issue for us, right? So that's worked well for us in financial services.
Cool. And we got this question from our audience, and I think this is a good question for you, Sanmi, as we're wrapping up. So what emerging threats or opportunities are you mostly focused on right now? And what's your approach of helping organizations respond quickly as those new risks coming up?
Yeah. So since maybe might be the last question, I'll again reiterate how much fun it has been working with them. So I think, again, as I've mentioned a couple of times, the enterprise security landscape, I think, is changing quite quickly and in exciting ways, but also this means the threat surface is evolving. Some of what we're learning, there's a lot more opportunity for multi-turn kinds of attacks. So, adversaries not looking to just use one jailbreak prompt. They're trying to manipulate across multiple interactions, multiple contexts, multiple modes. So if you have video and audio, these are some of the directions that Virtua has been investing in to make sure that we have a good detection and protection technology across, again, these kinds of more complex multi-turn kinds of settings. Agentic systems, I think, are some of the most exciting frontier. So we're seeing increasingly sophisticated attacks in agentic systems, where AI systems are not just for generating text or responding from a text format, but are now executing tasks, modifying databases, taking actions. The attack surface expands dramatically. We've built building technology to improve, again, our detection with Agent Red and our mitigation with Agent Guard around agentic kinds of deployments. Along the same lines, again, AI systems are now more complicated, right? It's not just the AI tool, it's external tools, it's API, it's data sources, it's the rest of the infrastructure. And attackers are finding ways to target these other dependencies and not just the models themselves. And so expanding the way that we think around security risks and the risk surface to allow us to adapt to, again, this much more sophisticated and more complicated setting, I think has become the frontier of how we're thinking about staying up to speed, staying up front on where security challenges and deployment challenges are going. Our approach here has been to stay deeply connected with the research community while maintaining rapid deployment. So I think some of the things that we do that are special are this translation between the sort of most recent, most up-to-date technical work to deployments that can scale in enterprise settings. I think state-of-the-art approaches, best-in-class, in my view, approaches for doing this translation. So we can push detections within days and not months from what has been found in sort of the frontier of the research infrastructure. And so this is, I think, the advantage of having research-driven AI-native security rather than trying to build everything in-house.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Sanmi and Andrew, for this very engaging and thoughtful conversation. And thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us today. We really appreciate your time spending with us. And if you'd like to learn more about AI and AI security, I encourage you to visit our website at virtuai.com and follow VirtuAI on LinkedIn. We will share our research, our tech deep dives, and events every day. And most important, please look out for our next webinar in about a month. We would love to continue the conversation with you. So once again, on behalf of VirtuAI team, thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Sam.